Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel, where today I'm going to walk you through how I completed the 6th and final path of the Epoch of Pain quest with a team of Mutant and Mystic champions. Now before we get into the Spider-Ham fight here, I do want to talk for a quick moment about the global node. It's called Against the Ropes, and basically says if you hit the opponent when their back is against their wall, you're going to take some damage back. So you really need to keep the action towards the middle of the arena, even towards your side of the arena is just fine. Because it's easy to lose track of where they are, and before you know it, you've done a full combo into the wall and you've taken some damage back here. So just pay attention to that as you go. Now, starting off here with the Spider-Ham fight, the general idea in this fight is that you have a number on your HUD there. You can see the number 2 right now, and the goal is to use the same special attack that is denoted by that number. And that'll cycle through every few seconds, and I believe you can switch it manually by using a light combo ender. And of course, the longer you are above a bar of power, the more spider nonsense he's going to get, and then he has the chance to go unblockable and evade, and it's really a bad time. The second thing that you need to know is that you really can only use a special attack when you have 3 or more debuffs on you. And if these are power stings, this is the best possible option, because with 3 or more debuffs, you're going to reflect all of the power sting damage that you would otherwise be taking back onto Spider-Ham. So with Storm here, what I'm doing here is basically just sticking to heavy attacks, because that's going to pause my prowess while I build up to my special 3. Once I have him at low power, I have the 3 available on my side of the screen, and I have my special 3 available. I'm going to go ahead and fire it off. You can see that did a huge chunk of his health and damage, and then we're just, kind of rinsing and repeating here. We can continue to heavy attack to keep our prowesses paused. We can add new ones as we continue to crit on the heavy, and her heavy is short enough that it's going to last for the entire duration of the parry stun, which is really important, because you want to minimize the chances that he's going to evade. So basic combos against him are super dangerous. Now let's talk about some other options you might want to use for this fight. For Mystic, I really would not recommend anybody in the Mystic class for this, because when his Spider Nonsense resets, it resets to a higher value with a Mystic champion, and there are plenty of good mutants here that you really don't need to use a Mystic champ. So anybody with high damage specials, especially mutants, of course, excel at that, are going to work here. MOONSTAR, DANI, Professor X is really good, and he'll stop Spider-Ham's evade. You can also nuke him down with Deadpool X-Force. But all in all, a pretty easy fight for the first one on the path. Alright, moving on to fight number 2. We got my girl VIV VISION here. This is a pretty interesting fight. So the deal here with Viv is that you really only want to stick to full 5-hit combos, because a combo ender is going to force her to consume solar energy, and you need to be doing this every so often, because if you don't, then she's going to gain this evade charge. You can see the timer there, and if she gains the evade charge, she gets a 100% chance to evade your next attack, including your striker, by the way. So using a full combo with a combo ender is going to reset that timer. Now, you are going to be rooted during her special attacks, as you can see here, and it is very important that you really don't push her to her special 2. There's a note on her that says if she throws a special attack with contact attacks, you need to parry every hit in that special attack, or you're going to take some damage and die. The special 1 is all non-contact. As you can see, it's just the solar beams there, but the special 2 is all physical contact attacks. So don't ever push her to the special 2 if you can avoid it. That also means that you're going to have to learn the full SP1 dex. It's all timing. Just practice with it. You'll get better at it. Do remember that when you are below a bar of power, it is going to be completely unblockable. So you really do have to learn it. Otherwise, you're going to take a whole bunch of damage back. It does deal incinerate damage, so a champion like Kushala here, a little bit better, because she's incinerate immune, and it won't be dealing that much damage back to her. Now with Kushala here, you want to be sticking to the special 2, and recall that VIV Vision is immune to nullify when she has at least 1 armor up effect active. So since she's going to have armor ups for pretty much the entire fight, I think she has armor break immunity in this fight as well. You really are only going to get significant amount of damage from Kushala out of her special 2, which is going to place that soul barb on her. And the good news is that between her loads of armor up buffs and your 10 ignition buffs, the soul barb is going to do a huge chunk of her health in damage when you get to it. Now, the other side of that is that you're going to have far less frequent access to your special attacks with Kushala and with anybody else in this fight, because whenever you hit into Viv, you're going to be triggering a little bit of power drain on every attack. And then if you heavy her, then she gets access to her phase passive, which is a little bit annoying to deal with as well. So the strategy here, as you can see, I'm just kind of playing it patiently, doing a ton of special 1 dexes, pretty comfortable with the timing on this, so this part didn't bother me. And then I'm remembering to punish them with full combos so that I can keep that evade timer on cooldown. Another option you can do here with Kushala, which I don't do in this matchup, is you can actually parry the beams when you're above a bar of power, because they're not unblockable, and that'll help you keep some of your blessings up. It's not totally necessary to do in this fight. I think the more blessings you have, the more chance you get for that soul barb to be passive, and I think, don't quote me on this, I think that the passive soul barb actually deals more damage than the active debuff. But again, if pairing the special attacks is not really something you're comfortable doing, and for whatever reason I didn't really feel like doing it in this matchup, don't feel like you have to do it. You can do this fight just fine with just normal dexes here. Now you can see here I triggered her evade charge because I wasn't fast enough, but I saw it coming, was able to hit into her and immediately hit block to do that. The other thing you might notice me doing is that I'm not really parrying at all in this fight. When you parry Viv in this fight, you give her a phase charge, and although I don't think it really matters unless you're hitting her block, I really am just avoiding doing it anyway. So whenever I need to get an opening on her, rather than baiting out a special attack, I'm just block baiting a heavy. So you are taking a little bit of extra chip damage there, but in the long run I don't think it really matters. So let's talk through some of the other options I have listed up at the top of the screen there. And full disclosure, I haven't seen any of these champions work, but I've been told that they work and discussed them a little bit with other members of the group that I did the planning sheet with, so your mileage may vary. Shathra, I believe, Outline from 4Loki did this fight with Shathra, had some success here. Her Power Steal should enable you to have much greater access to your special attacks than most other champions would in this fight, so you can pop those eggs on her, and then put the direct damage and the vulnerabilities and all that good stuff with Shathra. With Rintrah, since you're rooted during all of VIV Vision's special attacks, he's going to gain a buttload of energy resistance. He's also going to be unstoppable, and he's going to place a taunt on Viv too, so again, he's going to be super tanky in this fight. Deathless Guillotine is a Mystic champ who really doesn't need to throw her specials to get a high amount of damage. So with her, you can basically play the fight straight up, throw whatever special you want, but her degens from her critical hits are really where your damage is going to come from using her. In the Mutant class, it's really hard to recommend anybody, but Onslaught is just so generally good for everything. He's got the Neuroshocks, he's got the degen, and Viv is a metal champ, so she won't be able to shrug them off. So Onslaught, I would say, the best Mutant option for this fight. Alright, moving on to fight number 3, we got this ANNIHILUS here, and full disclosure, this is not my original run with Storm against this ANNIHILUS. I was not recording for whatever reason during my original path, so I actually had to go back in yesterday, the day before, and do this fight again. Didn't get the solo, but I got enough of it to kind of explain the fight to you. Now, similar to the Adam Warlock fight from the other two paths, you absolutely need a champion who has 3 or more buffs in order to do this fight. And when you're picking your team, if you don't have somebody who can gain 3 or more buffs, then you need to quit out and start over, because this is like a roadblock fight, very similar to that Adam Warlock. Now, the good news is that the fight is pretty simple to understand. That doesn't mean it's easy to do, but it is pretty simple. So the deal here is that you need to parry the last hit of his special 1, which is like a projectile attack. Don't ever push him to the special 2, that's going to be instant death. Now, if you parry the special 1 projectile, it's going to do basically no damage. If you block it, but don't get the parry off, or if you let it hit you, it is going to do a lot of damage. And you can only take like 2 or 3 of those with most champs before you die. So parrying the projectile is really good. If you maintain distance, there is plenty of time for you to parry and dash into punish, like you saw me do there. Now with Storm, what I'm doing here is really just relying on her just big special attacks to kind of nuke down huge chunks of his health there. So right there you can see I took the special one to the face and it did about 1/4 of my health and damage. So yeah, you want to avoid doing that. So with Storm again, you can keep the Prowess's pause whenever you have openings after your Striker, or after the stun from her special 2. I would stick to the special 2 or the special 3 in this fight, just because they're going to do a lot more damage than like a bunch of special 1s will. Now, the other thing you need to be aware of in this fight is that every time you hit into him with a basic attack, you have a chance to put a stifle debuff on yourself, just like there's one there. And if you dash back with a stifle debuff on you, he is going to trigger like a very short unstoppable buff, which is problematic because if you're trying to go for an intercept and you have a stifle debuff on you, he's going to punch your face in. So you really need to be careful when you're hitting into him, keeping one eye on your side of the screen so that you're not dashing back when you have the stifle. And if you are prepared for that unstoppable and ready to counter it. Other good champions for this fight, and again, anybody with 3 or more buffs. White Tiger, really, really good with her Furies. Mordo can charge heavy and get Furies as well. Dragon Man can get 3 power charges. Juggernaut, really, really good for this fight. Use the special 3 only with him so that his armor breaks and stuff don't remove your gem. With the Mutant champions, Professor X can do this fight, but you need to win one fight with him before you going in here to get one of those like permanent prowess. Storm X can also do this, again, with access to prowess buffs. And then finally, Dazzler is an interesting option. She can get buffs on her special 2, so if you play her with just the special 2, it might be a little slower, but I think she can do that fight as well. Alright, moving on to fight number 4, which is Mole Man. Now, Mole Man, we're really going to be unable to do any damage to him with our basic attacks, as you can see here. And the only way that you can deal significant damage to him is during his special animation. So any damage that he takes during his special attacks is going to be magnified and reflected back to him at the end of those special attacks. So you really want to focus on a champion here who has really strong access to damage over time effects. So Kushala is a really good option here. I might switch over halfway through and show you a run with Deadpool X-Force as well, but you really want to focus on damage over time effects. Now, of course, you know, if your damage over time effects are active debuffs, Mole Man is going to shrug them off, so you really can only apply them when he's in Frenzy. In addition, you have the Spite node here, which I actually think is kind of helpful because it allows him to get up to his special attacks more quickly, and if he's throwing more special attacks, that is potentially more damage that he's going to be taking if you have those dot effects on him. The other thing is you have Bubble Shield here, so you really want to avoid blocking a lot of heavy attacks against him. Try your best to intercept. Obviously, you can't hit his block either because he will go unstoppable with any form of those Monster Mass charges. Kushala I really like for this fight. She's not the fastest option, but she's really, really strong. If you can somehow keep her blessings up, then you get an increased chance to make those Incinerates passive, which means that he's not going to shrug them off, and they will do a ton of damage during all of the special attacks. That's really like the best approach with her here. Now, Kushala is a little bit of an exception here because she can place passive dot effects, but for the most part, every other champion that you can use here is going to have active debuffs. So having said that, you really want to keep him in his Frenzy mode for as long as possible, because once he's out of the Frenzy, then all of your dot effects are going to get shrugged off by him, and you need to push him back up to 20 in order to get him into a state where your dot effects are going to start sticking. Alright, let's switch over to my run with Deadpool X-Force. I do want to show you kind of like what the fight looks like with him. So with Deadpool, the ideal thing here is you want to get him into Frenzy, and you want to do a special one with 10 of those like Super Slap charges on you. And that's going to place a whole bunch of bleed effects on Mole Man. And if you don't have him in Frenzy, he's going to shrug the majority of them off. And then ideally, as soon as you end your special one, you want him to throw his special attack so that those bleeds start ticking as he is throwing the special attack. Then they're going to be magnified and tossed back to him here. So that first run there, I threw the special one. He really didn't cooperate with me, so I'm just kind of resetting myself and trying again here. Now, I didn't mention this a minute ago, but there is one other node that makes this fight a little bit annoying. I forget what it's called. I think it might be Clean Slate. There's like a Power Sting timer on Mole Man you can see, and every time that timer goes off, all buffs, all debuffs, and everybody's power is reset to 0. So again, that makes it a little bit more difficult to get debuffs to stick on him. If you like land your special one with Deadpool right before that timer goes off, then they're all going to be removed by the node here. So right here, we fire off our special one. You can see he throws his special 2 immediately while those bleeds are ticking, and that does a ton of damage, about 20% or so. So that's kind of like the ideal result here with Deadpool X-Force. But again, anybody with like good access to damage over time is going to work somewhat well in this fight. So in the Mystic class, I have Deathless Guillotine listed again. Really good access to degen. You might have already used her against, not Kushala, you might have already used her against Viv earlier in the path. Werewolf by Night I feel like is a hit or miss champ because all of his damage over time effects are physical damage, and Mole Man's physical resistance, especially as his health gets lower, is really high. So his damage over time effects are going to become less effective as the fight goes on. But in like a pinch, I think he could work. Purgatory has access to some degen. Diablo has access to poisons. Both of them can work. Again, your mileage may vary. In the Mutant class, I'm obviously showing you Deadpool X-Force here. Negasonic, all of her stuff is passive, and she can work for this fight quite well. He's not going to be able to shrug off her stuns either. And then lastly is Toad. Toad is fantastic for this fight because all of his poison debuffs are going to get turned into poison passives whenever Mole Man shrugs them off because he's a skill champ, and you're almost guaranteed to deal a good chunk of damage on every single special attack with Toad. So if you have a Toad and you don't have another really good option, definitely consider bringing him. Alright, getting close to the end here, let's talk about the fifth fight on the path, and that is DANI Moonstar. And for this fight, you can use basically anyone for. There's no type of specialized utility required, no type of specific damage required, and if you're really struggling with it, just throw a couple of team revives at it because chances are whoever you have on your team is going to work just fine. Now in this fight, a couple things you do want to pay attention to, and the first one is that you want to play stun immune, so don't ever parry her, and that's because she'll place a falter on you if you do that. Similarly, you don't ever want to hit her block, because when she has one of those blue illusion passes, hitting her block is going to immediately trigger a falter on you, and chances are she's going to immediately punish you as if she were unstoppable. Now the other big thing in this fight is that you need to know how to fully dodge her special 2. She is going to be special 1 locked in this fight, which means she will only be throwing her special 2s and her special 3s. So if you don't know the special 2 decks, getting hit by it or taking it on the block is going to kill you pretty quickly here. Now I do have a very detailed guide up on the channel on how to learn the SP2 decks for DANI Moonstar. I'll probably link that up in the top right corner of your screen here. But there are kind of like 3 main things that you want to pay attention to. This is kind of like the quick and dirty version, right? So she's going to fire arrows into the air. That's kind of like your key moment that you have to do something. Then she's going to pull out her gun. You want to dex the first shot of the gun. Then she's going to drop to her knees. That's the second dex. And then she's going to reload. Third dex is really about timing for me. And if you play with the audio on, you will kind of figure out and like adapt to the audio cues. But again, like, I'm not perfect in this fight. You see I already took like 1 or 2 special 2s to the face. And I don't get the soul in this fight because I'm a little bit rusty on this dex myself, to be honest. Now with Deadpool X-Force, I'm basically playing this fight just a normal way for him. So I'm firing off my special 2, getting that big Daunted passive on her, and then I'm going to go up and nail her with a special 1, which is going to do a ton of that Splee debuff damage. And she has Power Focus too, so it's really difficult to push her to the special 3. They really, really want you to be focused on her special 2 in this fight. So, well, again, with whoever you're using, just play them in the normal way. Whatever rotation is ideal for that champion will probably work fine for this fight. Now, again, I said you can basically use anybody for this fight. There is one kind of small caveat with that, and that is with the Mystic class. You don't want to use anybody in the Mystic class who can possibly nullify her prowess buffs, because if you nullify them, I think she does some damage back to you. Whatever it is, nullifying her buffs is like really, really bad, and you want to avoid doing that. So if you have a Mystic champ who has like controllable nullifies, like when they're going to trigger and you can specifically avoid them, that's fine. But, a champion, for example, like OG Scarlet Witch, you don't want to bring to this fight because she will be nullifying randomly, and you won't be able to control it, and then she'll trigger the node a bunch. In the Mutant class, again, really anybody works here. The bigger specials you have, the faster this fight is going to go. But again, like I said earlier, whoever you have on your team is probably going to be totally fine for this fight. I actually think I take this special 2 to the face and it kills me, but you kind of get the idea of how to play it regardless. Alright, let's move on to the final fight. This is probably my least favorite fight in the entirety of the Epoch of Pain quest. I really can't stand this fight. So this Tigra has like a neutralizing aura, so if you stay close to her, she gets these neutralizes on you, and then every time you trigger a precision buff from dexterity, you're going to get ruptured. In addition, you are rooted during her special attacks, which is problematic, and there's a node where she could possibly gain an unblockable buff unless you're far away from her. So then you really can't block her specials. You have to dex and potentially trigger those neutralizes and those ruptures. And to make matters worse, you can't bring in anybody who triggers any sort of immunity in this fight, specifically rupture immunity or neutralize immunity, because it's going to deal a bunch of damage to you. So I tried this fight a bunch with various champions, and the kind of the best way that I figured out how to do it was really just play like parry heavy. And with most mutants, most champs with a fast heavy attack, a parry heavy is going to not keep you close enough to her for long enough to trigger that neutralizing aura, which means it is then going to be safe to dex her special attacks without triggering a precision buff, or rather, without worrying about having your precision buff neutralized and then taking that damage. But honestly, like a lot of this fight feels like it's just totally unavoidable damage, and I still don't really have an optimal way of playing this to avoid that neutralize and still have like a really good tempo or rhythm to this fight. So champions with like really strong heavies are going to work well here. I know a couple of folks I know used America Chavez. She has access to really good damage. Her heavy attack animation is pretty lengthy, so I imagine that she will trigger the neutralize aura on her before her heavy attack is finished, so something you want to be aware of there. Kushala has a very quick heavy. I know a lot of people soloed this fight with Kushala. I think I ended up just using team revives here, and this is just one of my runs with Deadpool. So, my other runs were far less effective than this one until I kind of figured out like the parry heavy strategy. Goes without saying, of course, that you want to avoid champions who have any sort of like native buff. So like I'm not using Storm here because Storm is probably going to have all of her prowesses neutralized and taking extra damage. Wong is another really good option, has a very good heavy. You can kind of control how long you want to charge it depending on how comfortable you are with that. Shathra you might already have on your team from the division fight. She can work here. In the mutant class, Dazzler is a really, really interesting option because she has like that dexterity replacement. So she won't actually be triggering the precision buff from dexterity and can more or less play this fight straight up. Now that being said, she does gain buffs on her special 2, so you need to make sure that when you fire off your special 2 with Dazzler that you don't have the neutralize on you, otherwise you're going to have a really bad time. Strife is another really good option, a very quick heavy. He can increase his attack using those heavies, gaining those psionic charges or whatever they're called. And then again, Onslaught is okay for this fight. I don't think any of his damage over time effects are going to work, but he is just so strong, has a very quick heavy. You could probably get by in this fight with him using a parry heavy strategy as well. So folks, that's going to do it for Path 6 of the Epoch of Pain, and actually that is the last of my Epoch of Pain path guides. Again, I sincerely hope these were helpful to you. If they are, please remember to hit like, subscribe if you haven't already so that you don't miss out on future videos, and as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again next time.